What a day. What a day. We are so back. Howdy. It's been a while. Hello. If you join today's live stream and you weren't part of our live stream yesterday, then this may be the first time we've done a live stream since November. 4 months ago, I think was what we counted last time. Welcome. Hello. My name's Carson Long from Writing Theory. How you doing? Today's gonna be a chill day. We're gonna do some writing. We're gonna chat about some story stuff. You know, this Tuesday, Thursday time slot that we do is specifically set up for our friends over in the EU, over in Europe, and our Denmark friends, our Germany friends, our UK friends. So tends to be a little bit more chill than the chaos we get on Monday, Wednesday, Friday live streams. And that's what we're doing today. By the way, I had to turn up the latency of the stream, so I may not be as fast at responding to your stuff as I normally am, trying to figure out what works best for the live stream. Trying to cut down on the jitters and the skips in the video. I'm down here in the basement. Notorious Wi-Fi difficulty location. Is that the right words? So let's talk about what we're doing today. I'm gonna hop on over here, let you see my screen. You know I love tier lists. There's something special about the tier list. We're gonna start today sipping on some hot tea, getting some caffeine in the system a little earlier morning than I normally do my writing. We're gonna go through what sort of writing advice that you think is good, that we think is bad, that should be flat out ignored. Danny Dark, hello, good morning. Can't write with you today on account of work, but I'm here to support. Love that, Danny. Appreciate it. It's almost like a podcast then, if you're able to listen. Hello, everyone. Hello. Let's talk about writing advice because Thixie9, guys, welcome back. Our friends from the normal live stream time. Love to see it. Let's talk about some writing advice because it's not all the same, and I feel like we hear all of this kind of advice so frequently, and for the most part, I think what we see is not good advice. Let me figure out how I want to zoom in here. If you were part of the November live streams, you know I love a good tier list. Let's look at some writing advice. Have you ever heard the writing advice reread, rewrite, reread, rewrite? Which I don't think I have, to be honest. This doesn't really sound like writing advice I've ever heard someone suggest. Maybe there's some kind of post out there that's spouting this, but this just sounds like editing. This doesn't... Oh, Mina, hello, hello. This doesn't really even sound like advice. I've never heard this in my entire life. But let's talk about editing, right? I'm going to put it in the D category right now because one of the difficult parts once you get to your editing stage of writing your manuscript is knowing when to stop. I could do a whole video on when one day you're going to have to look at what you've written and say it's not worth it to spend more time trying to refine all these little bits. And that someday you're just going to have to say, it's time to send this out into the world. When I was writing Starlight Farms, Kennel for Talking Dogs, there were still things in my story that I was like, this isn't perfect. I know I could spend more time and fix this up, but it's a better use of my time to put out a story that's 85% of the way there and take everything that I've learned from that story and bring it to my next story, because that next story is just naturally going to have a much higher ceiling. Kind of crazy. It's kind of, if you're a perfectionist, I don't know if writing's the right the right thing for you. Lantern Valley says, I started watching the newest video. We'll watch it later. Live is on. Love it. Yeah, the newest video is our writing book breakdown. The first video on a prose writing book. I got big plans when it comes to tackling prose. And you know what? Maybe one of the ways to improve prose is to reread, rewrite, reread, rewrite. But this just feels... Oh, no. We're back. This just doesn't feel like good advice. Here's our next advice. Thesaurus. Let me ask you this. Is there anyone here that actively uses a thesaurus while they write? Is there anyone here who actively uses a thesaurus while they write? I think in... What's thesaurus? That's the villain from Lord of the Rings. I think maybe back in the day when I was writing my first stories, maybe in like middle school, high school, I would rely on like the right click on a certain word that I felt like I was using too much. Look at the synonyms. But I just think your vocabulary grows as you write. So like, the way I would say it is, if you're using a thesaurus while you write, you might be trying to set loftier goals than what you really need to be doing. The only time I would consider a thesaurus is when you find you're using the same word over and over and over again, which is an issue of vocabulary, but this is also how you kind of learn what to use instead of that word. You know, at some point you got to find different options. 69 says, I don't know why people think the thesaurus can help them. Most of them have tiny little arms. Oh my God. Baited so hard into an easy dinosaur joke. Lantern Valley says, makes villain who confuses heroes by using odd word replacements. If you've been watching Severance at all, that's a show built on crazy vocabulary. A lot of fun to see how they use words. I would say, I'm not going to say that this is any great writing advice, but I will say it's not bad simply because at some point you need to expand your vocabulary, and maybe this is how you do it. Of course, the best way to expand your vocabulary is just by reading more, seeing how authors are using words in the context of the story versus just a book that says, here's a bunch of words that mean the same thing. But maybe this is what you use to expand that vocabulary. Have fun. Oh, age-old wisdom. Have fun. Just have fun with it. S tier. S tier. Writing takes way too long for you to not be having a good time while you do it. You cannot be having a bad time when you're gonna have to put in dozens to hundreds of hours of writing in this world. Also, it's such a long form thing. If you dive into an idea you're not passionate about, that just sounds like hell on earth. That sounds really bad. You gotta have fun. This one's an easy S tier. Writing should be fun. That's like the whole reason we do it. Now, to be fair though, writing can also be pretty frustrating. And that's normal. You can also be mad or upset or disgruntled. But this is S tier. Easy S tier. Okay, now we're getting to some advice that's worth talking about. Trust the reader to understand. Trust the reader to understand. What do you think about this advice? Trust the reader to understand. The first thing the first way I process this is simply like, show don't tell, age-old wisdom kind of relies on the idea that like, if you choose to not tell the reader something, you're going to have to trust them to interpret it correctly. And that's not always just on you as the author. This is like a back and forth kind of thing. I also take this to mean things like you're allowed to ask the reader questions and not give answers right away. And trust the reader to understand that this is sort of a delayed gratification kind of thing. You're going to get those answers eventually. 69 says genre dependent. Maybe it depends on how you interpret that. Because show don't tell, pretty genre independent. But like if you're talking mostly about like science fiction exposition, trust the reader to understand what you're talking about. Definitely a science fiction-y kind of thing. I trust the reader to understand my magic system based on the clues I've dropped. Magic system readers, this is soft magic. This is bad. Oh boy. Soft magic. For those who don't know, soft magic system is where you have magic in your world, but you don't necessarily spend time defining the rules of it. And a hard magic system is like, Avatar, maybe not Avatar The Last Airbender, but closer to that, where it's like water people can do water stuff. Fire people can do fire stuff. Lightning is, here's the rules. We're going to set the groundwork that all the magic's going to be based on. I think Avatar still has some elements of like kind of soft. Brandon Sanderson notoriously has, at least in Mistborn, a pretty well-defined magic system. Here's like the exact rules you have to follow. 69 says, even Gandalf is hard magic. It's just seen as soft magic because the reader is a hobbit who doesn't understand his limits. Ooh, never heard that take. I've always assumed. Now, here's the thing. So what you're telling me is perspective matters. You're saying in the world of Lord of the Rings, Gandalf and his magic is a hard magic system. But in the portrayal of the story, because it's told from a hobbit who doesn't understand the magic, is portrayed as a soft magic system. I would argue that's just about every soft magic system. The author, the world kind of knows what's supposed to, what rules are supposed to be followed, but that doesn't extend out to the reader. You know what I mean? And I guess at the end of the day, it really just matters how it's portrayed to the reader. Trust the reader to understand. I think I'm going to put this low B. I do think a lot of writers, especially who are writing science fiction and fantasy, where you're creating all of these new rules, maybe spend too much time in trying to explain the rules of the world, trying to explain everything. You get those big exposition dumps. And so it is a skill you kind of have to develop to be like, I'm not going to explain everything. And I'm going to trust that the reader who wants to be part of this process, who wants to read these books, is just along for the ride. That's something that kind of only comes through practice and sharing your story with people and getting their feedback, which is the most frustrating kind of improvement to have to go through. It would be so nice if I could just say, like, here's the framework, here's the Here's the percentage value for what to explain, but it's not like that. Ask a friend for advice. Ask a friend for advice. This one's a tough one. Right? Let's talk about beta reading. Zoom out, asking a friend for advice. Let's zoom out to beta reading. Even people who are almost like professional beta readers, you as the author are still the one who is like determining whether or not to take that advice and apply it to your story. Blazako, hello. To take that advice and apply it to your story. And asking a friend, let's say a friend who is not a writer, who's not a storyteller, not even a big, maybe we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. We'll say they're a big reader. It's the same thing. Even if you ask for advice on your story, which I'm taking as almost like beta reading stuff, you are the filter. You are the filter for what advice is worth paying attention to. But also, I think you open yourself up to some tough situations when you ask a friend specifically for writing or for advice on your story or where it should go or how good is it. Because part of you is going to be like, I want them to say it's good. Part of you is going to be like, I want them to give me good feedback. Part of you is going to be like, this isn't the feedback I wanted. You know what I mean? Hey, that's good feedback, but I don't like that. Did you consider writing a perfect novel first try? You know, I just felt like that would be too, I could have done that. I just chose not to be more like the average person. And that's how I relate to, I don't know where I'm going with that. Asking a friend for advice, I would say more times than often, this doesn't work out the way that you want it. You should want to share your story when it's at a state to be shared with everyone around you. It's your contribution to the world. But I think asking a friend for advice a lot of times can lead to some disappointment. I'll keep this in C tier. CCC, classic content creator. That's right. Oh my God, do you see this? Writing advice, use proper grammar. This is... Is this even advice? Hey, here's some writing advice for you. Try writing correctly. Pfft, nerd. Has anyone gotten this advice? This is F tier. This is terrible. Get out of here. Not even spending any more time on it. Read everything. Oh my God. Poorly phrased. Maybe the writing advice should be, it's good to read and learn from authors and like study story. Great advice. Read everything. Poorly phrased. Blah. We talked about this a couple times on the channel, and I'm kind of surprised at all the different opinions that we get. So I'll ask you guys here. Do you think you need to read a lot to be a good writer? What are your thoughts? Do you need to read a lot to be a good writer? I thought, I'll give you my opinion right away. I was under the impression that everyone was kind of like, yeah, the more you read, the more story you absorb, the better prepared you are to tell your own story because you're getting exposed to different narrative choices and you're learning how different other more successful writers are putting things together and you're passively sort of absorbing that. But then when we started talking about it on the YouTube channel, I saw more opinions that were like, you can absorb story in other ways. You could watch movies, you could watch TV, you could read comic books, graphic novels. You could study other forms of story, and that still applies to writing. Technically, you don't need to read a lot to be a writer. 69 says, not personally reading is helpful, but I think there's more to gain from analyzing your own work rather than others. Interesting take. Danny says, I think it can be helpful, but also frustrating because I find what I want to read doesn't exist, and that's why I write it. You know what? We live in the golden age of self-publishing. Typically, if what you want to read isn't found in the bookstores and on the bestseller list, someone has been able to put that story together somewhere else. And if they haven't, you get to be the trailblazer. That's nice. What kind of stuff do you like to write? I remember the other day, Danny, I think you said you were and correct me if I'm wrong, this might have been someone else, we're writing the story about like the drunken heroes, this band of anti-heroes forced to become heroes. Dark fantasy comedy, I think might have been it. Let me know if that's right. Don't let me get all mixed up. That was 69. There we go. Sorry about that. I think read everything is not a requirement. I still see benefits. Danny was wholesome fantasy. Love me some. Oh, I remember our conversation we had about cozy fantasy. Lantern Valley says, "Oh, new writing advice. Watch lots of YouTube. When you need to learn something, learn what you need from the millions of people breaking things down and explaining it on the internet." I might be biased. I think that's fantastic advice. I might be biased. Danny says, "I was the military magic school." That's right. I love that. I love it. And Mina says, "I like to write anything that revolves around lesbian romance." Hey, big trend right now. Big market. Very cool. Reading everything. Does it help? Does it hurt? Let me give you a different perspective on this. If you are writing for an existing genre, whether it be cozy fantasy, military school, LGBTQ, romance, paranormal romance, supernatural, whatever it is, it would probably benefit you to read stuff in that genre so that you know what other readers are expecting. Now, most of the times, if you're writing a story in a genre, you're already a fan of the genre, but it's worth saying every genre has some specific sort of decisions that are made within that genre, and if you go into that blind, you might leave readers disappointed. That's not to say you can't subvert expectations. We talk about this all the time. Of course you can, but you should know the rules before you break them. So there's a good reason to read. I'll put this in C. I think it's better than ask a friend for advice, but I also think there's so much room for improvement here. Whoa! Oh my God. Look at third person over first person. This has some hot takes. I've never seen writing advice that's just like, screw this one perspective. Get that out of here. We only write in third person. Danny says, counterpoint, is it better to look up like beat sheets for tropes or novels? I don't know. There's a lot of nuance that you might pick up from actually reading a book in the genre versus a beat sheet, which is like a structure thing. You know what I mean? Probably wouldn't hurt to do both to better prepare yourself, to at least have the information to choose whether or not you want to follow it. I think I would still recommend reading a book in the genre or multiple books in the genre to know what to expect. But also, we had some great advice. There might be content on YouTube that can get you most of the way there. Sort of a personal preference thing. Do you feel like you need to dive into that genre in preparation or not? I think it's important to know what the genre expects before you write your story. For example, if you wanted to tackle a cozy fantasy novel and you wanted to have the ending be where this other side character dies, that's really not a cozy fantasy kind of story. Maybe the readers for that cozy fantasy book would be like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. I specifically wanted to read these books because it doesn't have life and death stakes. That's my example. 59 says, I think third versus first often comes down to adult versus YA. That's an interesting idea. First person is my favorite, but hard to find. My husband will not read first person. Some of my favorite novels are first person. He's tried multiple times and just can't do it for whatever reason. Interesting. You guys, I want to hear more. I want to hear more about your thoughts about Third person, first person, do you have a personal preference? It sounds like some of my favorite novels are first person. Good first person is my favorite, hard to find. And 69, I'm a fan of your YA versus adult fiction, first versus third kind of take. That's an interesting take. Now here's the thing. In my own personal opinion, you choose the perspective based on what's going to work best in your story, yada, yada, yada. Of course, that's the case. Most of what I read is third person. Good to know. Here's what I found. I started one story, and I think I was like 8,000 words into this story, and I was telling it in third person. That kind of comes naturally to me. I kind of write in a more sort of cinematic style. I like having sort of the lens of the camera to look through, to observe all these things, to pick up on more subtle body language cues and you know, situational kind of things. And sometimes first person doesn't let you do that for your main character. But in writing this story, here's what I found. A lot of what was happening in my story was going to be showing this new, you know, this was like an urban fantasy story, showing this new world, this dark underbelly of the city to my main character. And I thought it would be so much better, so much more impactful to be in that character's head. So when they experience something otherworldly, we can get their thoughts on it. We can internalize how jarring this is or how terrified they are, as opposed to getting this from the outside, if you know what I mean. And of course, someone's going to say like, hey, you should use third person omniscient, where you get to see their head, but you're also removed. And yeah, maybe someone else would have done that, but I just switched straight to first person and kept writing. And I was like, you know what? This feels like a better way to experience what I'm about to tell. Lantern Valley says, I find first person a bit odd too. Was chatting with a friend. He said a factor is because he has a voice/inner monologue, so it makes sense to him, but I don't. So it's like a natural barrier. Isn't it kind of crazy to find out that other people just like process their entire world differently than you? Like, I think one of the cool examples is like, when you dream, are you seeing it like you're, you know, there performing all the actions in the dream? Or are you viewing this dream like you're watching a big TV screen? Or are you viewing this dream like you're in the audience watching a movie theater screen? Or like, there's all these different ways you can process things. It's crazy to think. 69 says, switching POVs can feel awkward in first person too. Some people do it well, but oftentimes it's how would the first person narrator know this? You know, that's why they call it first person perspective. You only have one person's perspective of the world to operate through. I talked about, what video was it? In a recent either podcast or video, I think it was, I just recorded this podcast about Michael Crichton's books. And one of the things that I talked about there was that when you have just one single perspective and it's first person perspective, all of the information that you receive in this story is just what this person sees and knows. And so you lose the opportunity to create knowledge that the reader is aware of, but the character isn't. And I was talking about this because this is something that Michael Crichton does in a lot of his stories. In some other perspective, we're given some information that when we come back to this character who doesn't know this information, now there's like this tension. It's really cool. Really hard to treat this as a monolith. Depends on the story you're trying to tell. TLDR, what does the story need? Yeah. This is terrible advice. Terrible advice. Focus on quantity of writing. I mean, I think we all are going to say, don't write a lot of bad stuff when you could write less good stuff. I'll put it D though, because I don't think it's F tier. Of course, if you could easily choose between I'm going to do a lot of bad writing or I'm going to do less better writing, you're probably going to want to write better. Is that a hot take? I don't know. Is that a hot take? But the thing is, there is value in completing a work and taking everything you've learned to the next work. I've already talked about that in the same exact live stream. And so I guess the question is, you know, it takes the same amount of time. This is some verbiage. I'm sure there's an exact quote somewhere else. It takes the same amount of time to bring something from 0% to, I don't know, 80% as it takes to bring that thing from 80% to 100%. So there's like this opportunity cost kind of idea. Also, Christian, hello, welcome. I don't know if I've seen you in the chat before. Glad to have you here. Lantern Valley cuts over 1.5 thousand words last live stream. Quantity is good and all. Hey, that's why we edit. That's why we edit. Danny says, I'm going to disagree because it's like practicing writing to raise your baseline. Write more to write better. Christian says, for me, the first draft is all about quantity. You know, I talk about the proto draft like that too. Like, I think the hardest thing is to complete that first draft. It is way easier to edit your story after the fact than it is to finish a story. Oh my God. How many stories have you started versus how many stories have you finished? That's a tough one. I've probably started 25 stories my entire life, and I probably finished 2 of them. You know? Been binging your videos for the last couple days. Just watch your proto draft video. Hey! I love the proto draft video. That was one I knew I wanted to make. As soon as like the YouTube channel started, you know, getting more established, started figuring out the style, I was like, this is the video I've been meaning to like tell. I hope you like it. I hope you find it beneficial. Focus on quantity of writing. I think naturally through writing a lot, you will get better. I think someone said that. It's like the pottery study. Should you make 100 pots or 1 really good pot? I've never heard of the pottery study. I think I'd like 100 pots. I don't know. Am I different? Am I wrong? Take breaks. Take breaks. Our next piece of writing advice. Here's the thing. How many stories have you not finished? Don't hurt us. Don't hurt us. Don't think about it. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring this up. Take breaks as writing advice. I think one of the best things that you can do is write reliably in some sort of routine. Have a place to go, have a time to go. I think anytime I break that routine, which I guess in this case would be like a break that you didn't choose, like life just gets in the way, it's so hard to get back into the routine of writing. Hence why we're doing these live streams, the home stretch. But also, you can take breaks yourself and feel totally refreshed. One of the classic things that you hear from On Writing, Stephen King's book, is that when you finish a manuscript and you're about to start editing it, take 2 weeks off. Remove yourself from it. Don't look at it. Don't read it. Don't touch it. So you can come back fresh to experience that story. I'm gonna say A. And I'm gonna interpret this as don't get burnt out. Pretty good advice. Don't get burnt out. 69 says the student who made a lot of pots ended up making better pots in the end than the student who focused on making 1 really good pot. I like that. Read your writing out loud. Talked about this a lot. Even talked about this in the most recent video on prose, which is classic prose advice to make sure that your sentences are coming out good. Read your writing out loud. S tier. Easy S tier. You shouldn't do this as you're writing. You shouldn't have to speak the entire story out loud, of course. But when you're doing your editing, especially for dialogue, this is something that I consider to be like a must. We're getting some discourse on the breaks. I'm keeping it on A. I'm keeping it on A. There's a risk to taking a break. It's that you take the break, and what happens if you just like lose all your progress, if you lose your motivation? Christian says, unless you're dictating, what's your take on that? Which dictating would be drafting everything out loud. Christian, I don't know if you've seen this. I did a video breaking down a writing book all about dictation. It's called On Being a Dictator, or Being a Dictator, something like that, by Kevin J. Anderson, a famous author who famously dictates stories. Just goes out hiking in the mountains. I'm open to dictation. It's something that I'm continuously kind of trying and playing around with. This winter, we have a bunch of woods behind our house. This winter, we carved out a hiking trail all through there that goes in this big half-mile loop. The goal this summer is to spend some good time walking out through the trail, dictating some stories into my phone. I partnered with a... Oh, nice. I partnered... The company who I partnered with for that video, ProsWrite, I believe. Is that what it was? I think it was ProsWrite. Really good service for transcribing and dictation. Still a fan of them. Breaks don't have to be too long, but let things simmer. S tier. Out loud doesn't have to be the whole thing all the way through, but often. S tier. When I was editing Starlight Farm's Kindle for Talking Dogs, I took this book outside on a nice day, and I read the whole thing out loud. I think it might have taken me 2 sittings, but I think it's a good way to catch maybe some awkward phrases. The thing is, the way that you inflect and that you parse out a sentence doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same for someone else, but it is a way to catch some common errors. Danny says, I get really nervous out loud. What if all I hear is trash? No, Danny, it's not going to be trash. I hate the sound of my own voice as is. I don't want to hate how my writing sounds with it. All right, we got some people who are not loving the read your writing out loud. That's hilarious. It's still good advice. You should at least read your dialogue out loud. It also kind of helps you make sure that your different characters have these different kind of ways of speaking. When I was doing dictation, when I was testing out this dictation software, I found as I'm going through doing this drafting in the dictation, I was doing different voices helped me make sure that they had like specific unique sounding dialogue to that character. And the transcription service was totally fine in transcribing all that. And it was kind of sick, to be honest. Dick29 says, the advice is decent, though. I should probably throw my stuff into text-to-speech, since those highlight awkward parts, for sure. Use your dialogue in your voice training. There you go. There you go. Write daily. I used to think this was S-tier advice. I have a hot take coming up. I used to think this was S-tier advice. And then I read someone else's take on this being a bad piece of advice, with the idea that like it'll lead to burnout. And I think that's definitely the case. But I have done all of my best writing when I'm coming back to my story every single day. Back in Novella November, I was so like in tune with the characters from my story. I felt like I was like, it was so easy to portray them in that story. And now coming back after 4 months, it is so much harder to like remind myself who these characters are and their natural way of speaking. I'm kind of considering this part of my story to be like my ramp back up to that quality of character work. So, I think writing in a routine, S-tier advice. If that routine's daily, great. I think do not take this as if you don't write every single day, then you're doing it wrong. I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to bring it down to A. Specifically because interpret this as how beneficial it can be to write in a routine, but that routine shouldn't be daily if you don't want to write like that. 59 says, I think writing daily is okay. Just not write 2,000 words a day. Writing 65 a day is fine too. Danny says, it burned me out really hard when I was forcing myself to write daily. So I think write on a schedule. There you go. Exactly what I'm thinking too. I think that what am I trying to say? I do think that shifting your mindset away from I'm going to write X amount of words a day is not the right way to do it. I'm coming around to the idea of writing a chapter a day, writing a scene a day, or even writing until I feel satisfied. Sometimes that'll be 1,500 words because that's where I naturally stopped and was like, nice. Sometimes maybe that'll be like I have other things that I'm doing. I wrote 500 words and I'm like, you know what? That's enough progress for today. I have other things to go do. Trying to flip my brain out of the word count. There's a podcast episode I did. By the way, if you don't know, I got a podcast called the Writing Theory Podcast. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I did a whole episode called The Folly of Word Count. It's all about how word count is maybe not the right metric to be using for judging your own progress in writing. There you go. Simple is best. Simple is best. This is an interesting one. I've recently been exposed, and I talked about this in the live stream last night. It was dialogue by Robert McKee, where he was like, when you're writing dialogue, never write the obvious choice. Always ignore your first idea for dialogue and write the second idea. And I very much don't agree with that. Is simple best? I don't know. I can't really figure out how to even interpret this one, to be honest. What does this even mean? I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. Is it talking about prose? Is it talking about story structure? Is it talking about writing a book that's not an epic, multi-narrative, multi-perspective, religion-based war in an epic fantasy? What exactly is happening here? Unless you're writing super hard sci-fi where the readers want discussions about quantum physics, then write simple. I'm having a hard time figuring out what this one's supposed to mean. I think I'm going to put it down in F. I think it's 3 words that aren't specific enough to even be writing advice. The only way I interpret it is like Jade City Direct versus Charles Dickens spinning a chapter describing hot chocolate. Oh man. Don't ever read House of Leaves. Don't ever read Neil Stephenson. Neil Stephenson spends chapters describing how sound works. The advice is too simple to be useful. Therefore, simple is not always best. 69 nailed it. The irony of the tip being too simple. Boom. You guys have crushed it. Make drafts. What? What? F. Make drafts as writing advice. What's the alternative? Writing the final draft first? I'm out. Cut the pointless fluff, aka kill your darlings, aka keep it, straightforward. I would say make drafts sounds like advice for people who want to write their story perfect the first time. You know what? There's a reason that no one does that. Cut the pointless fluff. Kill your darlings. Stephen King says cut down 10 to 20% of your novel as you're editing. I mean, I think this is just a natural part of writing. You should cut. I guess I'll have to say, yeah, I agree with it. Cut out the pointless fluff. Now, that being said, maybe here's a hot take again. This being said, if you are writing something like Michael Crichton, remember this is just like the top thing on my mind since I just did a podcast on him. His stories are all about fast pacing. But I'll tell you what Michael Crichton absolutely stinks at is making good, strong, dynamic characters. What do you consider to be pointless fluff? Because I'm sure Michael Crichton has cut out a lot of character-specific, character-focused scenes so that the plot can keep moving and evolving and be exciting. But that pointless fluff might have been what would have made this story actually have a decent character. I have a video on killing your darlings where I talk about a lot of times you don't need to do that. You don't need to kill this, cut out this one scene that you really like. But instead, you have to make it do more. And that's exactly what Thixie9 says. Alternatively, replace the pointless fluff with intentional fluff. I talk about taking these moments that you really like, maybe these two characters interacting, and building this relationship between them. That's not pointless. It might be slower paced. Okay, well then move that to a part of the story where it can be surrounded by action. Rework this scene so it's done in a way that has fast pacing. Create scenes that do double the work. I'll say cut out the pointless fluff is A tier. Identifying that pointless fluff. Bigger conversation there. All right, we're almost there. The story has to make sense. Ugh, God, I should have screened some of these writing advice options before doing this. I guess that's good advice. I guess so, yeah. Have your story make sense. Are we talking exposition? Are we talking the order of events in your plot? Christian says, I guess it's about expectations. Some people read a book for the plot. Others read it for the story. I see some people who don't like 11/22/63 by Stephen King because it takes a lot of detours. Classic Stephen King. Fairy Tale, that book Fairy Tale, which is a more recent release. Also, what I consider to be, of all the Stephen King books I've read, one of the better ones. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. You say, I guess it's about expectations. Some people read a book for plot, read a book for characters, read a book for the setting or the story or the theme. The question is, was the reader adequately informed as to what the point and the focus of your story was? Because that's where the misconception can come about. You pick up 11/22/63, which I'm glad you posted that book in the comments. I can never remember the title of that story. I know. I'm bad with dates, I guess. Some people are going to see this as a time travel story with history stuff and be like, oh, wow, what a thriller. But then it's also like a romance story. And they're like, hey, wait a minute. I didn't sign up for no lovey-dovey story. But that's like a core point of the story. So it's about making sure that your reader knows what they're getting into so there's not that misconception. Specifically in regards to those points. Danny Darko says... Danny Darko, sorry. Danny Dark Emo. What does make sense mean? It doesn't make sense. I agree. I don't fully know. Let's move it down. Handwriting over digital. Get the out of here with that. Are you kidding me? Do you see this? Handwriting over digital is a crazy take. I know of one person in our Discord, which, by the way, if you're not part of the Discord, you should definitely come and join. Link in the description. I know one person in our Discord who drafts out their stuff longhand. And some people have talked about planning and plotting things by writing them out. I get it. This is an insane take. This is an insane take. I love handwriting, but I know it's not for everyone, but I have to do handwriting for proto-drafting and character and plotting. If writing didn't give me carpal... That's how I feel. There's no way I'm writing a 70,000 word story without my hand being in like a sling. Do hands go in slings? That doesn't seem right by the end of it. My hands are too crappy for handwriting. I'm not learning how to hold a pen. I do plotting, planning on paper, and I'll write short stories out longhand. Wouldn't want to do an entire novel, though. Well, 69, you have more stamina than I do when it comes to writing, handwriting. Here's what I'm coming around to. I think some of the best story planning I ever did in my entire life was when I bought like a 4x8 whiteboard from Home Depot. And I put it up on the wall, and I did all of my planning by just like free form writing things out, right? Here's like a section of the whiteboard for characters. Here's a section for what the setting's gonna be like. Here's like an entire outline of the plot I'm gonna write longhand. I felt totally easy being able to just like, you know, wipe things off, wipe things away, erase things I didn't like. And sometimes I don't feel that way when I'm drafting and plotting things in other ways. I'll do planning, plotting on paper. I'll write stories out longhand. Just read that. Dane says you build up the muscles when you handwrite. I don't want to. I don't need those muscles. Landon Val says I write over half of all my stuff by hand. What? That's crazy. Now, I was thinking of, it might be Daft Zeppelin. It might be, can't remember who it was. Someone else also said they write all their stuff out in, by hand. Can't exactly practice away a coordination disorder. Fair. Fountain pens, less strain. I do love me some fountain pens. I do have a little bit of a fountain pen collection. It's collected dust. That wasn't like a setup for a joke. That was like a series of sentences that just happened to sound like a good joke. Journal my progress in handwriting. That's cool. My Novella November was all by hand. 100,000 proto-draft plus all the prep. See, but that sounds great for you. Because of that, I'll put this in D. Be as creative as possible. Okay, here's the deal. Be as creative as possible, I don't think is great advice. Because I think that it's totally worth it to explore tropes and cliches. And I think it's totally worth it to say, what are the core components of a murder mystery story? Because I want to include those in here. Are you not being creative because you're following a structure that someone else has put together? If you're following a plot framework, is that more or less creative? I don't really know. Again, these aren't great. But be as creative as possible. I'll put in D as well. Hard to interpret that. Ooh. Murder mysteries are full of creative murders. Here's kind of what I mean. I think it was the Story Grid by Sean Coyne. One of the better writing books I've read, to be honest. I think he puts out the idea. They put out the idea that stories within specific genres, and they use murder mystery as an example. Stories in specific genres tend to have scenes that you have to include because that's what makes the genre. All right? Here's what they meant. In their example of murder mysteries, the inciting incident of every murder mystery story is finding a body, a murder having happened. And the climax of almost every single story here is the confrontation of the killer. They also say that a hallmark, a core thing you have to include in fantasy and science fiction is this newly created world. And a story that doesn't contain that element isn't a fantasy or science fiction story. What do you think of that? Lander Valley says there's lots of dragons too. Same thing, done all sorts of ways. The dragon or murder is like the contextual placeholder so the story can happen. Dragon murder doesn't actually matter. That's what, I agree with you. So, that's what I'm saying. Like, okay, is be as creative as possible. Does that mean you can't do things like that? I don't know. Bad wording for bad advice. Don't use difficult words. Why use many word when few word do trick? That's what I'm saying. You can only write so many locked room mysteries. You end up with a string tied around a katana. Is this an anime joke I don't know about? I guess it depends on where you're placing the emphasis on creativity. Absolutely. Don't use difficult words. As someone who writes more direct, who right now at this point in my life has more simple prose, I tend to use pretty basic language. When you're writing, here's a good question for you all. When you are writing your story, do you, and you're writing your description and your detail in your story, are you purposefully trying to choose the most descriptive words to paint a picture? Or are you choosing the words that just come naturally to you? Because I don't think those two things always go together. Danny says, what are difficult words though? Totally fair point. I have some words I love, like labyrinthian or chartreuse. So those count as difficult? I think that's a good question. What are difficult words? Depends on if my style is more flow of consciousness. Definitely Blazaka, for sure. For sure. Style plays a huge part in it. And you can write stories of different styles and use different word choices. Totally worth saying. Yeah, this is a style thing. I would say this is pretty bad advice considering that it's mostly the style you want to write. Like if I pick up a Guy Gavriel Kay book and the whole thing with Guy Gavriel Kay is beautiful prose, or if I pick up Patrick Rothfuss, who has such a great way with words, part of that experience is like, this author's style is this. Like they are using not the obvious word. And that's okay. I don't know if it would be advice though. Proliferate linguistics to the melancholy of your assemblage. What did you just call me? Analyze your story. You know what? Whatever. Great advice. Whatever. Every sentence needs a reason. You know what? Yeah. You know, okay. I'll move this up in A. Every sentence needs a reason. I have to think about it more of just like, what's the point of this? What's the point of this advice? Yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with giving someone the advice. Every sentence needs a reason. Every sentence needs to say something. Every sentence needs to have a purpose. Wrestling with the words. Hello. Oh, stopping in to say hey. Appreciate it. Big fan. Big fan. For anyone in the chat who doesn't know, Wrestling with Words is another great writing YouTube channel. If you like the writing theory content, you will definitely love Wrestling with Words. Even if the purpose is adding to the vibe. There's a good point. Good point here. Every sentence needs a reason. In the most recent book that I read on prose, so this was the best thing that came out from this latest writing breakdown was the fact that the author, who, by the way, cosmic coincidence, the author of the book I just did a writing breakdown of, their name was Francine Prose. They wrote a prose book, and their name was Francine Prose. What? That's sick. That's crazy. Okay. Anyways. If the sentence intentionally has no purpose, is it bad? Was the sentence created to have no purpose? Because then, paradoxically, its purpose was to have no purpose. This is almost like, I remember having an argument with my English lit teacher back in like grade school, where they said every story has a purpose. I was like, what do you mean? They were like, every story has a purpose. And I was like, that doesn't help. What does that mean? They were like, every story, look at me, has a purpose. And I was like, what if you just wanted to write a story that has no larger purpose, is just for fun? They were like, then the purpose, look at me, is fun. Okay. Thank you for the kind words, Dory Stream. Nice. Wrestling with words, big fan. The reason for the sentence is to show that not all sentences need reasons. Are you sure that they didn't say every story has porpoise? All right. Classic writing theory tier list where we end up spending a whole hour talking about it. Oh my gosh. I like doing these tier lists. I just like discussion on story. Here's a question for you guys. What other things would you like to see in a live stream? Would you be interested in like an editing focused live stream where we take a story from the community and we look at maybe something like the opening chapter and talk about what it does right, what it could improve on, interesting decisions that were made and how we feel about them? Would you be interested in a live stream where we write and finish a short story together and talk about the process? Would we be interested in a live stream where we have like open office hours and you can come in and submit your story and say, here's the kind of feedback I would like, and we just chill out and talk? I'm seeing some yeses in chat. Okay. I think that'd be fun. Also, I'm looking for an excuse to play some video games on live stream while we hang out and chat. So let me know how I can make that fit the brand. Appreciate you. I've wanted to do just like a writing theory community game day. I thought that'd be fun. Find a game that's easily accessible by everyone. Haven't yet found it. Story-based games like Ace Attorney. I have the Ace Attorney games. I haven't really played them, yo. I was going to say yet, and then I was going to say yo. I mean, though, and then I said yo. Play video games and take writing questions. I like that. All right, you guys have convinced me. ASMR Minecraft live stream coming soon. Hello. How's everyone doing? That's where the money is. I need to place this block. Hold on, I need to tap on the microphone. Wow. Pristine content. Top tier. S tier. We're shifting the channel. We're now an ASMR writing channel, but that also plays Minecraft. Hey, I'm just giving the people what they want. That's actually Chicken Man. Where have you been? Welcome. You've been here the whole time and you didn't say anything? My God, Chicken Man. Steve went down to the mines. I'm not going to say the pickaxe trembled in his hands. No. There's no trembling in this ASMR script. We're getting too off track. Hey, you asked for it, I provide. Oh, Chicken Man, well, glad to have you here. Glad to have you here. You just missed a tier list of writing advice. There was a lot of not good writing advice in this one, though. All right. I think I'm supposed to do some writing on this live stream at some point. These Tuesday, Thursday live streams are a little bit more chill, you know. I just like talking story. You know how it goes. All right. For those who like Chicken Man who maybe weren't able to join the Monday live stream, let me give you the purpose, the update. Here's what's happening, all right? Back in Novella November, was writing every single day. It was fantastic. I was in the head of the characters, making great progress. 1,500, 2,000 something words a day on the live stream, and it felt so easy. And then what happened after the live stream concluded? We hit December. Say it with me. We got no more progress done. That's right. Life just got in the way, priorities shifted, and I had 40 something thousand words in a story that just sat there for like 3 months. And so now I have 2 weeks before everything's changing again. 2 weeks before I got some work stuff that's happening. And so in these 2 weeks, we're coming back to the live streams. We're doing writing on stream. And maybe even towards the end of it, we'll do something really fun. Yeah. And so we're back here, working on the same story. This is Upon Careless Gray Hills, if you remember, in my Scrivener file. But we're at 53,000 words. I got some writing done over these 4 months, but not nearly enough. Not nearly enough. One day we're going to have to do a cooking live stream where I'm cooking up a story, but also some food. I don't know. I just like, I like doing fun things. I don't want to sit in here in this, as lovely as this filming room is, I don't want to sit in this filming room for every single live stream we ever do. You dig? Anyways. All these just disjointed thoughts coming back in. Secret recipes for success. I love that. There's the theme. All right. So what's the plan? I think we're about to do some writing. Is anyone else going to be doing some writing along with me? I know we had some friends who were doing some writing. I know Lantern Valley doing some editing. Danny did some writing yesterday. Loved it. And Mina. I know Mina did some writing too. I will try. Gonna prep for my IELTS exam. Good luck. A 10-day montage to get through. I'm on lunch now, so I can get in a bit of writing. All right. Well, you know what? Let's not overstay our Danny lunch welcome. Why don't we go ahead and get to it? I'm learning maths, unfortunately. That is quite unfortunate. I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm procrastinating writing by watching the stream. Oh, you're in the wrong stream, buddy, because we're about to start writing. Christian, if you haven't, since I haven't seen you in chat, I don't know if you've been in one of our live streams before, but feel free. We're about to put 20 minutes on the clock, play some lo-fi music, do some writing, and then come back and keep hanging out and having fun. That's what I was supposed to be doing while I was doing the tier list. But it ends up being like a really easy way to make some progress on your story. So feel free to join us. I'm turning the lo-fi music up. Also great to help you study. Turn the microphone off and 20 minutes on the clock. It's for a test I need to do in order to study psychology. Oh, okay. Is that your... Okay, gotcha. Now, Christian, you're here. You might as well. We're keeping... Yes! He says he's in! Let's go! All right, let's do it. Lo-fi going up on a Tuesday. Microphone going off. See you in 20 minutes. And just like that, the writing sprint is done. See what I'm saying? It just goes by so fast once you put your nose down and start writing. See, I'm sitting at 53,816. Let's bring up that word count. 816. Look at that. Look at that. How'd everyone do? Anyone make some good progress editing, drafting, otherwise? Studying maths? You could use these live streams for that too. It's just Pomodoro style time management. Mina, 125 words. Nice. Nice. Good job. Danny, 317, but I was also eating. 317's good. That's still good. 317 and eating is great. Dual purpose. 69 got 262, but I'm trying to be careful. There you go. Are you just trying to be more careful with like your prose or how you write? What are you trying to be more careful with? Manon says, character idea. The protagonist is told to control his emotions, yet he doesn't know about emotions in general because he grew up being apathetic towards all forms of them. How's that for a story idea? Well, there's not much of a story idea there, but you do have a character idea you could expand on. That's pretty good. Christian says, nice, I got 400 words in. I'm now at 47,440. There you go. And Manon says, just reading The Art of Fiction by John Gardner. Hey, that book's got some good chapters. It's also got some chapters that are a little tougher to get through. Let me know when you get to metafiction. The scene is montaging past 10 days, so it's balancing the pacing by showing what's important, then telling and skipping parts that aren't. The montage. The montage. It's interesting. I never know how to approach montages. One day I should do a study on them. Because, like, there's value in the montage. But I'm always left wondering, is there a better way to try to tell this kind of progression? I don't know. Here's a question for you, 69. Is it a montage of travel? A montage of a progression of skill? Like, are we talking like Rocky climbing the stairs? There are things that happen during this period that are important, but interesting, but not interesting and go into detail. I can't read. My brain's breaking. Travel. The travel montage. There's a book that I read. It's a fantasy book. It's called Kings of the Wild, I believe. Has anyone heard of this book? I feel like I remember it having a good way of handling travel montages. Kings of the Wild. This book, I feel like I remember had a couple different instances of this kind of like showcasing travel and only like telling little bits of things, but then also doing a good job portraying like a lot of distance covered. This is a fantasy book where groups of adventurers, like your classic D&D adventurer group, are treated like celebrities or like rock bands in this world. So we have a group of like 4 or 5 older people. They're all old and gray, past their prime, gruff. Some of them are kind of missing the, you know, the good old days, being back in the band, and they have to go on to one last final mission. And every time that they go through a town, everyone's like, "Oh my God, the boys are back in town. The group's back together." It was a pretty good book. I feel like I remember them handling the montage travel well. I read this book after reading Brent Weeks' series, the Lightbringer series, which is a 5-book big epic fantasy. And I liked that series so much that when I read the next books following that of just like other authors, I was like in like a post-series haze. Every book that I read, I was comparing to how much I liked this 5-book series by Brent Weeks. Kind of not fair to these other books. Non says, how about a montage of many events that one notices, like an elder sister writing a diary, remembering summer vacation? Could be. You could do a lot of stuff with the montage. It's just a matter of finding the right way to do it. Which is maybe something that just comes from giving it a shot and sharing it with someone and saying, hey, did this work? We got a new person in chat. Young legend, we'll call you. In the works of editing, writing a second draft, and cutting my first chapter out, I've had to realize a lot of places where my word choices weren't explained yet. So far, the flow is better now that I know my characters. Yes, that's why I talk about the temporary beginning. Young legend. I find that when I sit down and I start writing a draft, and maybe this is what you're talking about, maybe it's not, so let me know if I'm going down the wrong path. Anytime I start a story, I start it with an introduction of like, I know I'm going to have to come back and change this whole thing. Mostly because by the time I finish my story, I'm going to know so much more about my characters. I'm going to want to go back to the beginning and make sure I introduce them correctly. It sounds like maybe you found that to be the case as well, and then maybe it also extends out to word choice and stuff like that. Leonard Valley says, did I get the potato award from the last challenge? That was never clear confirmed. Has this been living rent-free in your head for weeks now? The potato award, for those who don't know, in our last writing challenge, one story that was submitted, my wife was unsure of for the first half of the story, whether or not these were humans or potatoes in the story that we were talking about. The story was, I can't remember which story you did, Lantern Valley, but it was a post-apocalyptic story where there were people that were mutated. And I think specifically what confused my wife was the addition of extra eyes, and considering that potatoes have little eyes on them is what they call them. I think maybe that's why she thought they were potatoes. So if that wasn't your story, then you did not get the potato award, I'm sad to say. But if it was your story, congratulations. 59 says, prologue is very much, it depends. Is the coming of age, this is in regards to, does a prologue work in coming of age genre? Because there's some genres where prologues don't work. 69 says, prologue is very much, it depends. Is the coming of age hero following in the footsteps of their own hero? If so, a short prologue can work. So, let's talk about prologues. Let's get it back here into this little chatting scene. Okay. So when it comes to prologues, here's a question to ask. What's the purpose of your prologue? Because there's typically a couple specific reasons to write a prologue. Number one, and you see this in Game of Thrones. You see this in, what would be some other good examples? The Wheel of Time. Both of these huge epic fantasy series start with a prologue that does two things. The first is to start with some action. What better way to get a reader invested in your story than by having it open with a bang? And yet, you don't always want your very first chapter to be action-packed because you are potentially setting a foundation for what life is going to be like for this character. Right? Coming of age, hero's journey. That's like the whole idea is like the hero's journey plot spends the first portion of its story being like, this is what normal life looks like for this character. So that after everything in the story happens and we return to some similar setting, vision, think of the hobbits returning back to the Shire, we can see what's changed with our characters. And yet, sometimes you just want your story to be exciting right from the get-go. Christian Banks says, Way of Kings has 3 prologues. Now, Sanderson Sanderson's interesting because those 3 prologues, I believe, I'm trying to think of which prologues we're talking about. There's the one about Seth, I think is our big action prologue. Seth wore white the day that he killed the king, I think is how it starts. That's an action prologue. But also, a lot of these same action prologues, like Game of Thrones, also serve to be like, here's like the rules of the world. Here's what you can expect. Here is like the promise I'm making to you as the author for the kind of encounters you're going to see throughout the rest of the book. Right? So in Game of Thrones, what we see is that this is a world grounded in reality. But yet, there's some sort of supernatural thing happening with these White Walkers that kill a party of people. We also know that it's cutthroat. We know that there's politics and power dynamics. Those are all present in the prologue. And that's the promise that's made for the rest of the book. And the third prologue is called Chapter 1, but it takes place years before the next chapter. That's a tough one. That's a tough one to analyze. It's been like 10 years since I read The Way of Kings. I'm probably going to have to do another read through now that all 5 books are out. I read The Way of Kings. I read the first 3. I never read 4 or 5. Sad. But prologues, you have to ask, what's the purpose of your prologue? Also, I think for the most part, prologues can work in just about any genre, my personal opinion. I'm sure someone's done a prologue in a murder mystery. I'm sure someone's done a prologue in, I've seen it in science fiction, seen it in fantasy. Specifically in regards to something like a coming of age story, my advice to you is you can do a prologue if you want, as long as you do it well. As long as it serves some kind of purpose. If you want to start your story off with a bang, what else can you do in that prologue that's going to pay off later? Are you making a promise to your reader? And if so, where does that promise come back? That makes sense. What are some of the big famous prologues? Game of Thrones has a pretty famous prologue. Wheel of Time has a pretty famous prologue. Murder on the Orient Express technically has a prologue since there are 2 trains and the first train kind of feels like a prologue. Man, once you start opening up your definition of a prologue to this feels like a prologue, you're in dangerous territory. Manon says, how about a prologue creating a tone for the whole story? I'm creating a somber tone, but the franchise that the pitch I'm working on is family friendly and optimistic. I think that it should do more than just reinforce the tone. That should be, any part of your writing should reinforce the tone of your story. But your prologue shouldn't be there just to enforce that tone. Take9 says, that was the Murder on the Orient Express. Christian says, I realized the prologue in my story worked better if it was later in the story when the reader is already invested in the plot. Now that's some story analysis. Good job, Christian. That's a tough one a tough call to make. Sometimes I think when you are writing, especially when you have already like completed most of your writing, like when you're in the editing stage, it's hard to commit to like making those big changes. At least that's what I found. Of course, that's what editing's for. So like clearly I'm failing in some way. But that's good progress. To make sure that we do at least 2 sprints, we're going to go ahead and hit our next writing sprint. And then we'll wrap up the live stream. So I'm going to put we'll do 15 minutes here on the clock. Share my screen. And let's try to end with some good writing, some good editing, some good math studying. Let's go, says Chicken Man. Let's go. All right, I'll see you guys in 15 minutes. Let's do it. Another day, another writing live stream down. Look at that. How'd everyone do? I think I'm ending the live stream with 1,100 words typed, added to the story. I feel okay about them. I don't love what I've written so far, but like I said, I'm still treating this as like getting back into the groove of things. Learning my characters again, making sure I understand sort of the direction that I want them to go. We're getting there. We're getting there. I did miss these characters, so it's nice to return back to them. Mina hit a roadblock. Only 26 words. The roadblocks are tough. But you know what? You were here writing today, and that's still progress. I'm sorry you hit the roadblock, but at least you can say today I did something on my story. 59, 253, so total roughly the same I got down the last stream. Technically, we wrote less time in this live stream, but you still made good progress. Danny says 413, but I'm not confident in the scene. That's okay. That's what editing is for. Let's go. Danny, it's been a great, enjoyment having you here, even on your lunch break. Remember, tomorrow our live stream is the time slot that we had last night. So for me, that's 6 to 8. I'm in Central Time Zone. Those tend to be a little bit more attended, viewed. I don't know what the right word is there. But we have a good time no matter where we are. Good job, everyone. Good job doing something on your story. I had a good time chatting with you. I'm about to go have some lunch, and then I have a video to go edit. Next week's video, the video coming out on Monday, is about surrealism, which I think is a really fun topic. Because when I find a story that has these elements of surrealism, I'm always left wondering what the heck is happening. So I hope you like it. Also, podcast coming out tomorrow, 6 a.m. my time. Should just be there in the morning for you. Looking at Michael Crichton's stories and what makes them so easy to read, and what can we learn from the way that he writes that we could apply to our own writing that might be addictive. I was watching the prose vid, so didn't type. Hey, that's still learning. That's still writing. That's still the good stuff. This is not a pipe video. What pipe video? What are you talking about? Pipe video. Every video is a pipe video, deep down. I don't really know what that means. Surreal, yes. I think it's a really cool idea. I hope you guys like it. If you've watched Lost, I use some great examples from there. If you've watched Severance, which has been a big trendy show lately, I also pull some examples from there. Yesterday we were talking about, this is not a pipe artwork. Yes. This is not a pipe. I recall now. Are you telling me I could just paint a pipe and write some words saying this is not a pipe, and I could have gone down in art history? Some people have it too easy. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining in today. I hope you had a good time. We got some writing done. It wasn't the most writing we've gotten done. Today was more of a chill day. Tomorrow, if you would like to come and join and do some editing, study some maths, do some writing yourself, I'll see you then. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and good job. Good job today. Take care, everyone. I'm going to go eat lunch. It's going to be real good. It's going to be real good lunch. Bye, everyone.